very specifically started discussing about the main conceptual areas, right? The main concepts, the fundamental concepts that is important for a business organization, right? The whole understanding is before you do business or before you start a business, you got to understand these fundamental concepts, right? Right. Without these fundamental concepts, you won't be able to start a business or run a business, right? So that's why we were harping upon concepts like needs, wants, then products. Then we discussed about markets, right? About markets. And also last week we discussed about concepts like effective demand. But if you all can remember, I took very good examples on how to understand effective demands, the two factors that needs to be there in effective demand. Then on top of that, we discussed about exchange and transaction, the difference between exchange and transaction, right? And later we discussed about satisfaction, right? So throughout the past 6 weeks, we have been discussing or we have been taking a deep dive into these fundamental concepts, right? So, students, today we are going to enter into a new area, right? Right. Actually, this is why we are here to learn, right? So today only we are going to start about business, right? Today only we are going to discuss or we are going to start our discussion about business, right? 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 Now you know. Now you know the fundamentals. Now it's time for us to know what is a business and take things forward. All right? Okay. So let's take a moment. And before we take things forward, do you all have any questions? Do you all have any clarifications, students, with reference to the parts that we have covered in our previous weeks? Physical students, are you all okay? Is everything all right with you all? Okay. What about online students? Is everything all right? Up until now, do you all have any questions? Ah, all right, everything is good. All right, okay. So students, if you all have any questions, please make sure to talk to me, okay? Right? So I will remind it once again because when we are conducting the class, if you have any questions while we are doing the class, we'll sort it out, right? Don't stay up until the end of the class or don't stay up until the next week. If you have a problem, then and there on real time basis, we'll sort it out. Okay. So that's how we work. Right. Okay. All right, students. So we'll start off business. We'll discuss about business, right? So this is business studies. We are learning how to do business. Then first we got to learn what is a business. So students, first, right, we'll put the definition, right, for a business, right? There are ample amount of definitions in the world, right, to what you call define businesses, right? There are ample amount of definitions in the world to let's put the definition of business first and then we'll discuss, right? Okay, so please write in your note, right? Okay, please write in your note business, so you can fill the blanks. Business is any economic activity. Please write business is any economic activity, right? Business is any economic activity that aims to fulfill needs and wants. That's the definition which has been given in your teacher's guide, right, and in your syllabus, right? So in that case, when you've been asked to give a definition in your examination also, you got to use this definition, right? Okay, right. So we'll harp on this definition. We'll explain, we'll dig deeper to this definition and see what is actually a business. Very important, student, very important, right? Business is any economic activity, right? Business is any economic activity. Very important, right? Very important, right? Now in here, why didn't we say that business is any activity, right? Rather than saying business is any activity that aims to fulfill human needs and wants, rather than saying any activity, we use the word called economic activity, right? Now, students, there's a difference between a simple activity and an economic activity, right? There's a difference between a simple activity and an economic activity, right? So what does that mean, right? Now, students, if you take any activity, right? If you take an activity, right? An activity is simply anything that you do, right? An activity is simply anything that you do, right? It could be you do certain activities just to have fun, right? You might do certain activities just to learn, right? On a daily basis, we do certain activities, right? Okay. On a daily basis, we do certain activities, right? You might play cricket, you might watch a movie, right? Uh, or else you might go on a small jog, right? Those are all activities. Those are all activities, right? But if you look at a business, business very specifically defines to be doing an economic activity. Very important, right? Economic activity, right? Economic activity, very important, right? Economic activity. What is this economic activity, students? Right? Very simple, right? Now, if you are conducting an economic activity, listen to me very carefully, right? If you are conducting an economic activity, right, there are two main objectives of an economic activity, right? There are two main objectives of an economic activity. So what are the two main objectives of an economic activity, right? Okay. So if you look at the first objective of an economic activity is where we conduct an economic activity to satisfy human needs and wants, right? To satisfy human needs and wants. To satisfy human needs, needs and wants. There you go. There you go. Right. The main objective of an economic activity, or compared to a simple activity, your main objective of conducting an economic activity is to satisfy human needs and wants. Is to satisfy human needs and wants, right? That is the first objective. Then what is the second objective, students? Right? What is the second objective? Right? By conducting this economic activity, right, you have another objective to earn money. Earn money. Earn money, right? Can you see the two objectives of an economic activity? Or I would say two of the most important characteristics of an economic activity. Right? To satisfy human needs and wants and to earn money through that economic activity. Now, let me give you a small example, students, right? Because in business studies, we can understand things through examples, right? Now, let's say the activity which I'm doing, what I'm doing, I am teaching y'all, right? I am teaching y'all, right? Conducting business studies classes, right? To y'all, to advanced level students. Now, in here, in this activity of teaching business studies to students, I am satisfying a particular human need, right? I'm satisfying a particular human need. What is that human need, students? What am I satisfying through lecturing? What is the need that I'm satisfying? Y'all can help me. Y'all can give me the answers, right? Right? Y'all can give me the answers. What am I trying to satisfy as a need through lecturing? Education, right? I'm trying to satisfy your need for education. That's why you come here. You come here to learn, right? Not for anything else, no, right? You don't come here to dance, or you don't come here to get yourself entertained, right? You come here to learn. So I'm satisfying your need for education. There you go. I'm satisfying human needs and wants through lecturing, right? Then on top of that, students, right? Y'all are paying me, right? 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 So all of y'all who are coming to my class, y'all are paying me a monthly fee, right? A monthly fee, right? So through that, I am earning some money out of it. I am earning some money out of it. So this is a very simple example of an economic activity, right? Now, students, if you look at a simple activity, not an economic activity, if you look at a simple activity, right? Like let's say you're playing cricket, right? In the evening after classes, right? You have some time, you're playing cricket with your friends. It's an activity, right? Right. Are you satisfying your human needs and wants? Yes, up to some extent. You're trying to entertain yourself, right? So you're satisfying. But are you earning some money out of it? No, right? You play a match with your friends and do you get paid? No, right? Unless you have to go and pay IPL and something like that. Okay? There you go. That's the difference between a simple activity and an economic activity. Understood? Right? Understood? Right. Okay. So can I get an understanding whether you all understood? Can I get a thumbs up from online students? Can I get a thumbs up from my online students? All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Understood. Right. So we'll go back to the note. We'll take things forward. Right. Okay. So now you know, right? Business is any economic activity. Now you know why we use the word economic activity for a reason, right? That aims to fulfill human needs and wants is a business, right? So uh, anyone who is conducting an economic activity would be taken as a business organization, right? Okay, right. So students, this is the first definition, right? This is the first definition of a business, right? And the most important definition, right? Then we do have another definition also that could be used to define business. So let's look at what that definition is, right? Okay. So all the activities related to, so you can fill the blanks first. After that, let me explain it to you. Okay. All the activities related to, all the activities related to production, all the activities related to production, production, distribution, distribution, right? Distribution and selling and selling of goods and services with a profit motive in order to satisfy human needs and wants can generally be defined as a business, right? So all activities, right? So in a different way, economic activity has been put in a different way. Any activity that you do related to production, right? What do you mean by production, right? So you get raw materials, right? And then you are putting the raw materials in a factory to the machines, and then you're transforming these raw materials into finished goods. That is called production. Distribution. Some business organizations, they conduct activities to distribute goods. Once the goods are being manufactured, then those have to be taken to the customers, right? Those have to be taken to the market so that customers could access those products. That is called distribution. This is called distribution, right? And then selling, right? Selling. involved in activities of selling, right? It could be through a small shop, right? It could be through a small shop, through a small boutique, or it could be through an online platform. Like, can you remember we learned about market space, right? Like Temu or Daras. In those, business organizations are selling. It could be physical or it could be in a space, right? Anyway, any activity related to production, distribution, and selling of what? Goods and services with a profit motive. Very important, students, right? A business organization will do business with one of the key objectives to make profits, right? That's why it says profit motive. They're doing all these activities to make a profit out of it. And at the end, ultimately, we are doing business to satisfy human needs and wants. We do all these activities at the end of the day to do what? To satisfy human needs and wants. Understood? Even in the first definition also, right? That was there. Fulfilling human needs and wants. Understood? Right. Okay. However, right, not all businesses operate on a profit motive. Right, right. Now, students, if you look at in the market, there are some business organizations who are not earning profits, right, right, who are not who doesn't have an objective to earn profits, right? We call them as not-for-profit business organizations, right? Not-for-profit business organizations, right? So basically, now their objective is actually different, right? Right. Their objective is actually different. They actually want to, uh, uh, they actually want to provide social welfare, right? For social well-being. So there are certain business organizations who are there in for social well-being, social welfare, helping others, right? Trying to create a positive influence on the society, right? Right. There are some business organizations like those also where their main objective is not profit, right? Their main objective is to uh, provide support to the society or to increase social welfare, right? But on top of that, they do certain activities to earn some revenue as well, right? So anyway, we will be discussing about these types of not-for-profit organizations when we are discussing business types of business organizations in lesson 4, right? Okay, right. So there are not-for-profit motive entirely. So examples like government institutions, right? Government institutions, right? Such as schools, universities, right? Right. If you take, there are certain schools like government schools where you don't have to pay a fee, right? But I mean, some schools you don't have to, I mean, entirely, I mean, they're not actually scrapping off your entire fee, but you will have to pay a small amount, right? A very negligible amount. If you take universities, state universities, of course, right? State universities, of course, they don't charge you for your degree, right? So you're getting a degree free of charge, right? So those are organizations which are not into profit motive, but they're helping for the well-being of the society. Right now, if you go to a state university, right, you get a degree. You get a degree. You don't have to spend any amount. But if you do that same degree in a private university, it will cost you closer to 5 million, 6 million, right? Right. But at the end of the day, these state universities, they are satisfying the need for education, the need for education, right? But their main objective is not for make profits, but for the social welfare. They are doing it for the benefit of the society. They're giving a helping hand to students who wants to be successful in their lives. Understood? Right. Then we have things like libraries, right? Museums, hospitals, right? If you go to state hospitals, right? If you go to state hospitals, right? Right. So they are also doing sort of a business, right? But their main objective is not to make profit, but the main objective is to look after their patients, right? And all things are done free of charge. All the things are done free of charge, right? There are people, a lot of people who doesn't have proper financial stability to go to a private university and get treatments. And if you go to a private university, if you stay for one day, it'll cost you a lot. If it'll cost you a fortune, right? Your bill could be more than 200,000, 300,000 just for a day, right? So there are people who cannot afford that. So those people, how they are trying to satisfy their need for medical through government hospitals. So government hospitals are funded by uh, the government of Sri Lanka, right? And through these government hospitals, we are trying to what do you call treat patients who are not in a position to get treatments from a private hospital. Look at the social welfare, right? Look at how social welfare is being executed. Understood? So main purpose is to provide social services or social welfare. Okay, right? අපි සිංහලෙන් කියනවා සමාජ සුබ සිද්ධිය උදෙසා. සමාජ සුබ සිද්ධිය උදෙසා, right? So anyway, we will be discussing much about not-for-profit business organizations in lesson number 4. So I just gave you a small idea of how these not-for-profit organizations could work. Okay, right. All right, students. So before we take things forward, kindly just take 1 minute, reconcile, and after that, we'll move on to the main characteristics of a business organization. Okay. So some students are asking whether to take one definition and keep in your mind, or whether you have to know both the definitions, right? So students, what I would suggest is take both definitions and keep it to your mind, right? Put it to your mind. Very important, because both the definitions are very important, right? It has been tested over and over again. So my recommendation is take both the definitions, read it carefully, and then put it to your mind. Understood? Right. Good. Okay. All right. Now, students, when it comes to business, there are certain characteristics that you need to know, right? There are certain characteristics that you need to know, right? Okay. Right. Now, this is also an important area which is regularly covered, or which is regularly what do you call tested in your examination, right? So in that case, make sure that you what do you call give your fullest attention to this part of main characteristics of a business, right? Right. First characteristic, you can write the first characteristic of a business. You can write in the first blank, right? You can write in the first blank. Exchange or selling takes place. Right? Exchange or selling takes place. That is the first characteristic of a business. Exchange or selling takes place, right? So let's read, right? Okay. Now, students, if you look at a business, right? If you look at a business, exchanging or selling takes place is one of the main characteristics, right? Okay. Right now, in a business organization, right? In a business organization will deal with a particular product. Right now, we all know if it is a product, it could be a good or a service. Right? It could be a good or a service. Right? So any business organization, right? Any business organization will exchange these goods and services. Will exchange these goods and services. Right? Is it free of charge? No. For money. Right? For money. Right? If you want to obtain a particular good, or if you want to obtain a particular service, then you got to pay and get that. Right? You got to pay and get that. So that's why it says exchanging or selling takes place, right? So in business, right, we know that we need to understand that every product, it could be a good or a service, it has a value. It has a value, right? Right. So that value is called actually the price, right? That value is called actually the price, right? So the foremost characteristic of a business is selling or exchange of goods and services for a monetary value. For a monetary value, right? If you want to buy a piece of chocolate, you go to the nearest boutique, you pay 150 or 200 rupees, and then you buy the chocolate. There you go. Exchange or selling takes place, but for a price. Right? So buying or selling of goods and services at a price is essential factor of the business, right? I told you all, right? Right. A business organization is doing an economic activity where it has to earn money. Therefore, each and every good and service they offer will have a price. That's a main factor of a business. If there is no such selling or exchange, then there is no business, right? If there is no selling or exchange happening for a monetary value, then there is no business. Then there is no business, right? Right. So I have given a very classic example, right? At home, your mother is cooking food for you, right? For your breakfast, for your lunch, and for dinner, right? Okay, right, right. So you might be thinking it's a business. No, it's not a business. Why? Your mother is cooking, right? For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I mean, your mother is not charging any money for that. No? Huh? If she's making rice and curry, right? She will not say, hey puta, right? This is your packet of rice and curry. Give me 500 rupees. She doesn't say that, right? Because it's not a business. It is done with love. It is done with love, right? It's not an economic activity. Mother is not doing that for an objective to earn money, right? Exchanging and selling happening, but there's no monetary value. But let's say your mother is cooking different types of food like string hoppers, rice and curry, right? And then she has a small restaurant in front of your house where early in the morning people who are going to office, right? Students who are going to school, they are coming to your mother's restaurant and then having their breakfast. Now, at that particular instance, your mother is not preparing breakfast free of charge, but the people who are enjoying her food has to pay. That's a business. That's a business. Understood? There you go. Right. All right. So the second characteristic, right? The second characteristic of a business. What is the second characteristic of a business? What is the second characteristic of a business? Transaction of goods and services takes place, right? You can write transaction of goods and services takes place, right? Transaction of goods and services takes place. Okay, take it up a bit. Transaction of goods and services takes place. Okay, right. So all the businesses produce or purchase goods and services in order to sell others, right? Okay. So basically, as I mentioned in my first point, right? Right. Business organizations are involved in a transaction, right? To exchange goods and services, right? Okay, right. To exchange goods and services, right? So a business organization will exchange different types of goods and services. Now, if you all can remember, under the classification of goods, right? We classify different types of goods, right? Right, right. We had what do you call consumer goods, right? Right. We had industrial goods, right? Right. And also we discussed about the classification of services as well, the direct services, the business support services, right? So there you go, students. Any business organization will do a transaction for goods and services. They will provide different types of goods and services, right? There is no hard and fast rule that it says a business has to do or has to involve in selling one particular good. No, there's nothing like that, right? Okay. So transaction of goods and services takes place. We as consumers, we go to the market, then we pay, and then we obtain these goods and services. That is called transaction of goods and services takes place. Okay, right? So they can be consumer goods. There you go, right? In the note, it very nicely encapsulates, right? There can be consumer goods, industrial goods, right? Right. So these are the different types of goods that business organizations are dealing with. Okay, so you all have a better understanding in here because we discussed about the classification of goods, right? Okay. So then on top of that, intangibles, right? Services, right? Services, right? Electricity, insurance, banking services, right? Anyway, a business organization will deal with a transaction of goods and services between a consumer and buy itself. Understood? Right. Then we'll move on to the third characteristic of a business. Third characteristic of a business, right? Okay. Are you all with me, students? Yes? Right. Okay. The third characteristic of a business is where it says a business organization will involve in a continuous transaction, right? Right. Let me repeat it once again. A business organization will involve in a continuous transaction, right? What does that mean? Continuous transaction takes place. You can write the point there. Continuous transaction takes place, right? Okay, right. What does that mean? So let's go to our notepad and let me just explain it to you with a small example, right? Okay, right. Continuous transaction takes place, right? What does that mean? Right, right. Continuous transaction, right? So students, listen to me very carefully, right? Continuous transaction. Continuous transaction, right? Okay, fine, right? Now students, just assume that, right? Listen to me very carefully, okay? Listen to me very carefully, right? Just assume that you have a vehicle at home, right? Say you have a nice vehicle at home. Let's say you have a BMW. You have a BMW, right? Let's say a nice SUV, right? A BMW, right? BMW. Right. Okay. Now you have a nice BMW at home. Okay. BMW vehicle at home. Right. Okay. Now just assume that you have been using this vehicle for the past 10 years. Wow. Right. You have been using this vehicle for the past 10 years. Quite a long time. Right. You have been using this vehicle for the past 10 years. Right. Right. Now your father wants to sell off this vehicle, right? Now your father wants to sell off this vehicle, okay, right? After 10 years, now your father wants to go for a different model of a BMW SUV, right? Right. So now he wants to sell off the vehicle, right? Now he sold the vehicle. right? He sold the vehicle, right? Sold it. He sold this vehicle, right? Okay. Now, can we elaborate this transaction as a business? Can we elaborate this transaction as a business? What can you say? What can you say? What can you say? What do you think? Any guesses? Can you elaborate? I mean, just don't think anything, right? Just according to what you have learned, just tell me whether this is a business or not. Right now, I mean, if you see it very clearly, yes, there's a physical good, right? And it is being sold for a particular price, right? Let's say for 100 lakhs, right? Let's say for 100 lakhs, it is being sold for 100 lakhs, right? Right? 100 lakhs. So there's a price, right? There was a buyer, right? Who came and bought this BMW, right? Right. It is a business, okay, right? So some students say it's a business, right? Okay, it's a business, okay, right? Right, fine. So I mean, at a glance, it's like a business, no? At a glance, it's like a business, right? Okay. So I will happily take your answer. Very good. Right. Then I'm gonna take this scenario to another level. Right. I'm gonna take this scenario to another level. Right. Let's say there's a car sale. There's a car sale. Let's say CS car sales. Right. CS car sales. CS car sales. Right. 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 So they have a car sale, right? Right. A very what do you call, a very popular car sale, right? Where they sell different types of cars, not only BMs, Mercs, Toyota, whatever the type of vehicle they sell, right? What if, what if, what if CS car sale is selling a BMW SUV just like what your father had to a customer, right? This is not your BM, not your BM, right? Because you don't have only one BM in the country, right? Just like your father's BM, CS car sale, right? Has a same type of a vehicle, and he sells this vehicle to customers. He also, CS car sale is also selling vehicles to customers, right? For the same price, I would say, let's say for the same price, right? 100 lakhs. 100 lakhs. Okay. Right. Now, what can you say? Now, tell me, students, whether CS car sale is doing a business or not. Now, you all told me that your father is doing a business. Now, tell me whether CS car sale is doing a business or not. Yes or no? Yes or no? Tell me whether, I mean, there could be right answers, there could be wrong answers. That is fine, students. Right? This is the moment that you learn. Yes, right? Right? So students are saying, okay, CS car sale is doing a business. Yes, it does a business. Right? Business. Now, students, is it worthy for us to say that CS car sale is doing a business, and just like that, your father is selling his BMW, right, to go for another model, and he's also doing the same business? It's worthy to say that? You can't, right? Why? Because of this characteristic. Continuous transaction. Continuous transaction. Now, if you look at from the perspective of CS car sales, their bread and butter is selling vehicles every single day. Isn't it? Importing vehicles from Japan, German, Vietnam, Taiwan, whatever the country, you bring the vehicles to the country, you maintain a huge fleet of vehicles. Whenever a customer comes, they would be selling the vehicle. So CS Car Sale is continuously doing this transaction every single day, every single time, day and night. Continuous transaction of selling cars. Now tell me very carefully, is your father involved in continuously selling a car? Or is this just a one-off one to scrap off your old vehicle and go for a new one? What do you say? I'm asking, is your father is continuously doing this transaction? Yes or no? One-off one, exactly. Your father is not selling a vehicle on a daily basis. He is not continuously doing a transaction in terms of selling a vehicle, just like CS Car Sales. In that case, students, what your father does is not a business. Not a business. It's not a business. It is just a transaction only. It is just transaction only. But what CS Car Sale is doing is actually a business. Why? Continuously doing the same transaction over and over again of buying and selling cars, buying and selling cars, importing and selling cars. Understood? So that's one of the major important characteristics of a business. One of the major important characteristics of a business. Now, did you understand this concept? Physical students, yes? Yes? Online students, can I get a small feedback like a thumbs up whether you understood the concept? Yes or no? Right, okay. So you got to understand that, right? Right? If you're doing a business, if you are been calling yourself to be doing a business, then you got to do a transaction on a continuous basis. On a continuous basis. Understood? Right. Okay. So I will give you a small time, like around 40 to 50 seconds. Quickly draw this, right? And then we'll read the note. Right. Now, students, very important, right? When I just say certain things, when I just draw certain things on my smart board, you got to draw them in your note also. Very important. Okay, you got to draw them, because in the future when you see these graphical presentations, it's very easy for you to understand. Right, go ahead. Right, okay, right. A continuous transaction takes place, right? I hope you noted it down, right? A continuous transaction takes place, right? Business activities must be continuous, underline, must be continuous, right? You have to do it on a continuous basis. If the transaction of goods and services are done continuously for a long period of time, it is known as a business, right? Just like what CS Car Sale is doing on a daily basis, 24/7 or 365 days, they are into selling cars. Not like your father selling off a car after 10 years, right? If only one transaction takes place, it is not considered under business. Right? Understood? Good. Right. All right. Then we'll move on to the fourth point. Right. We'll move on to the fourth point. Right. What is the fourth point? Write it down. Okay. Motivated by profits. Right. Fourth point. Right. Motivated by profits. Right. Motivated by profits. Or you can write benefits. Motivated by profits or benefits. Right. So students, if you take a business organization, right, 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 In normal context, a business is done very specifically to earn profits, right? Right? You want to start a business. You do a business to earn profit. It could be in any industry. You might be into manufacturing biscuits, or you might be into uh, selling vegetables. Whatever activity, whatever economic activity that you do, you are motivated by the profits. You're doing the business to make profits, right? So that's what it says. The basic goal of a business is to earn profits and acquire wealth, right? And acquire wealth, right? Now, students, if you take the concepts, the two concepts of profit and wealth, those are two different concepts. Okay, those are two different concepts, right? Earning profits and acquiring wealth, those are two different concepts, right? So I will just roughly explain you what is the difference between profit and wealth, right? So let's go to our notepad, right? Right. Let's go to our notepad, right? Right. 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 So first, let's talk about profit, right? Very simple, right? What do you mean by profit? What do you mean by profit, right? Right. Profit is very simple, students, right? Right. Right. Profit is very simple, right? So in profit, how to calculate profit? First, you put your incomes on one side, right? Your incomes on one side, right? You put your incomes on one side, right? Income, right? Right. Right. So in single, we can call it as Adayam, right? Adayam, Adayam, right? Income minus your expenses, right? Minus your expenses, minus your expenses. අපි සිංහලෙන් කියනවා වියදම්. වියදම්. This is called profit, right? This is called profit, right? So very simply, right? When you're looking at profit, you're focusing on what are the inflows that you're getting, what are the inflows that you're obtaining, and what are the outflows, your expenses. So you get the difference. If your incomes are higher than your expenses, then it's a profit, right? Right. If your incomes are higher than your expenses, right, it's a profit, right? But if your incomes are lesser than your expenses, where your expenses are high, it's a loss. So this is called profit, right? This is called profit. So profit is actually looking at the current performance, right? On a current basis, then, right? On a current basis, what are the incomes that you obtain and what are your expenses? Am I making a profit or loss? Right? So you calculate your profits through your income statement, right? You might have done for your O-level commerce, right? For accounting, right? And even A-levels also, you have final accounts and all, right? In your income statement, you are calculating your profit, right? That's why you put in your income statement on the top, you put all of your incomes, no? And then at the bottom, you put all of your expenses, right? So if your incomes are more than your expenses, you make a profit and vice versa. That is called profit. That is called profit. Okay. Then students, what do you mean by wealth, right? What do you mean by wealth? Some students think that profit and wealth is the same thing or the same concept. Not really, right? Not really. Wealth is a different concept, right? So when you're learning business studies, you got to learn these things, right? Okay. What do you mean by wealth? Right? Right. What do you mean by wealth? Right? Right. Wealth is actually very simple, right? In simple terms, we call it as wealth is the total assets that you have, right? The total assets that you have, that is called your total wealth, right? Right. So basically, you have your assets, right? You have your assets, right? So you might have invested in lands, you might have invested in buildings, right? You might have invested in vehicles, you might have saved money in bank accounts. All those things are taken as your assets, right? Your asset base. From this asset base, you got to deduct your what? Your liabilities, right? Your liabilities, right? Liabilities. This is your net wealth, right? Right. So that is called your wealth. So if you take wealth, students, this accumulates, right? This accumulates over a long period of time. Okay, right? Today you buy a vehicle, next day you buy another vehicle. So to your vehicle fleet or for your vehicle assets, you'll be adding. Could be for your lands, you're buying a land today, you're buying a land next year and a year after. So your assets are accumulated over and over again, right? Right. Okay. Right. So that is called your wealth, right? Right. That is called your wealth. Now, normally, you might have seen if you take what do you call what do you call if you take these billionaires, right? Now in the world, you are ranking the billionaires, right? You're ranking the billionaires, right? Number one, number two, right? Number three. I think in the world, I think still it's Elon Musk, right? Right. So when you're ranking the billionaires, right? You're ranking one, two, whatsoever, based on your wealth, right? Based on the amount of assets that you have, right? Okay. Right. So that's why I say wealth is accumulated over a long period of time. So wealth is something long term. This is something long term, right? But profit is something short term, right? So that's why you calculate your profit for a particular year, right? Okay. So this is called your wealth and this is called your profits, right? So I hope you understood this concept, profit and wealth, right? But in your examination, they won't be asking what is the difference between profit and wealth. But just wanted to just kind of explain you all what is the difference between profit and wealth, because a lot of students they they think that these two concepts are the same, right? Right? Understood? Right? Okay. Anyway, if you look at one of the main characteristics of a business is to actually earn profits, right? Is to earn profits and also to acquire wealth, right? Earn profits and acquire wealth, right? Right? Because you cannot earn wealth. You got to acquire. That's why I said you buy a vehicle today, you buy a vehicle next year, right? You add those assets to your existing asset base, right? So you cannot acquire wealth, right? So you cannot earn wealth. You got to acquire it. Understood? You got to add it. Anyways, so basically, that is about that is characteristic, right? Motivated by profits and benefits, right? Motivated by profits and benefits, right? Okay. So student, now let's move on to the next characteristic of business, right? The next characteristic of business, what is it? Right? The next characteristic of a business, you can write it as has a risk. When you're doing business organization has to face risks, right? 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 Right. So when you're doing business, students, very important. Are you all with me? Yes? Right. So students, when you are doing business, right, you got to understand that you have to face risks, right? Avadhanam valta moona denda venam, right? Because we are talking about the business world, students. Business world is very uncertain, right? It's very uncertain, right? It's very dynamic. What do you mean by dynamic? It changes. It changes time to time, right? The customers that you all deal with, right? The customers that you all deal with, they will also change, right? They will also change. We can call it as the change in consumer preferences, right? Right. If you're in the clothing industry, sometimes your customers might want to buy t-shirts and later they want to buy shirts. Change in consumer preferences. Change in consumer preferences, right? So this business world is highly uncertain. There might be possibilities where a different competitor comes to the market and change the entire market, right? So it's a risk. When you're doing a business, it's a risk. What if all of your customers will go to that competitor and buy its product? What will happen to you? You won't be able to make any sales, or you won't be able to make any profits. You will make loss. You will incur a loss. So there's a risk of making profits. There's a risk of earning profits, uncertainty in earning profits, and there's a possibility of incurring losses, right? So when you're doing business, students, you got to understand that the business world is changing day by day, right? The business world is changing day by day, right? Okay. So in here, I just want to give you a small example, right? Right. So if you take uh, 20, 30 years ago, we had in the world, there was a giant in the smartphone industry, right? Nokia, right? Right. You might have heard, right? How many of you all have heard about Nokia? Nokia? Hmm? Students who are joining online, you all have heard about Nokia, right? Yes, right, right. Yes, right. Okay, right. So Nokia was actually the market leaders in the smartphone industry. They had a superb phone, right? Okay, right. Those days, when we were schooling, having a Nokia phone was like you're at a different level. You had a different level, right? They had different features, right? There were models like N73, N96, right, where you could flip the phone, right, and you could separate the screen from the keyboard, right? So totally a different level of mobile phones, right? Right, 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 right. Those days, right? But later, what happened? Now, Nokia at that time, they were the market leaders, right? Right. But later, Apple came into the market, right? And they offered a different type of a smartphone, right? Back in, if I could remember, it was back in 2003. Right? It was back in 2003. Uh, they introduced the Apple phone, right? Where you have all the things in one mobile phone, messaging, calling, right? What do you call GPS, everything in one smartphone. That actually changed the direction of the smartphone industry. It was a risk for Nokia, right? So consumers started using Apple phone later on. And there were other competitors came into the market, Samsung, Huawei. Right now, Nokia was nowhere to be found. Right, right. So that's uncertain. The business environment is uncertain. You don't know what will happen tomorrow. You don't know what will happen to your customers. You don't know what will happen to their preferences. You don't know whether a competitor will come tomorrow and just change the entire industry. Don't know. That's why we say in business, there's a risk. There's a risk, right? Understood? Right? You might be the leader in the market, but you got to understand there's a risk of doing business where everything would change, right? Okay, right. So I have given you some points where how what do you call how risks could be created, right? how risks could be created. It could be through changes in consumer taste, right? Today customer likes white and tomorrow customer will like red. Change in consumer taste or design or demand, right? Changes in production technology, very important, students, these days, right? Technology plays a key role in doing business, right? Right. More you adopt technology, more you win, right? Right. You cannot deal with manual procedures or manual technologies. Understood? Right. So changes in production technology, as a business organization, there's a risk for you. So you got to adopt. Increase in market competition, as I told you, different competitors will come into the market and offer different types of products, right? So the customers will switch from your product to their product, right? Risk, losing the customers. What else? Scarcity of raw materials, right? Yes, scarcity of raw materials, right? Power failures, shortage of fuel, right? A lot of business organizations, they are dealing with scarce resources. No, if in economics we learn resources are scarce. Ne, අපින් හිඟයි කියලා කියනවා. සම්පත් හිඟයි, right? Right. So one day there'll be a time that you won't get these raw materials, right, abundantly, right? Right. Then shortage of fuel. Now, very recently we had a lot of issues with fuel, right? Bringing fuel because of the war and all, right? We never expected a war to erupt in Middle East, in between Iran and what we call Israel. We never expected that. That's why I said, as a result of those things, it affected business organizations a lot, right? So there is always a risk in doing business, right? You cannot always be the god to think what will happen tomorrow. You cannot do that. You don't have powers to do that, right? Right. So when you're doing business, if you don't have the power to what do you call, to know what is happening in the next minute, then you got to be ready for it. You got to be ready to face the risks. Understood? There could be employee problems and strikes. Those will also create risks, right? What if your employees doesn't want to work for you? They want their rights, right? More salaries, more benefits. Until the benefits are being given, until the rights of employees are being accepted, they won't be working. Employee problems. Without employees, can you run the business? You can't. You can't. There could be risk of fire, theft, burglary, no, natural disasters, right? Right, right. Those things we are not planning, right? Okay. Tomorrow at this particular time, no, at at around 9 o'clock, there'll be a fire eruption. Can you plan it? No, right? Those are all uncertain things, right? Right. Today in the night, a burglar comes and just loot all of your assets in your factory. Got to face it. Risks. You don't know that. So in order to mitigate those, you got to have certain plans, right? Incorrect management decisions. Yes, right? The top managers in the organization, if they make bad decisions, that will have a risk on your business organization. Your business organization will fall. Why? Due to incorrect decisions. If you make an incorrect investment, then you won't be able to get a return out of it. Bad. There you go. So students, when you're doing business, or if you are willing to start a business, you got to understand that you will have to face risks. Business always faces risks. There is no business in this world which doesn't face any risks unless the business is carried in a different planet. Okay, understood? Right. So when you're doing business, you got to have the guts to face the risk. If you don't have the guts to face the risk, then of course it's better not to do a business. Understood? Right. Good. All right. Right. We'll go to the next point. Right. We'll go to the next point. Okay. A business organization will create wants. That is the next point. Create wants. This, of course, you all know, right? We discussed on the very first day itself, right? create wants based on the needs that you have, right? It could be food, water, clothing, shelter, entertainment. Based on the needs, a business organization will create a want, because wants are options that are there to satisfy your needs, right? Right. So if you take entertainment, to satisfy the needs of entertainment, some business organizations are having movie apps like Netflix, right? Online movie apps, right? Some business organizations are creating what do you call these what do you call entertainment centers like Leisure World, no, Pearl Bay, what do you call Disney World, right? Okay, entertainment center, some business organizer. It's a different option to satisfy the need for entertainment, right? Right, right, right. Some business organization will have movie theaters like Scope Cinemas in Sri Lanka. They have theaters in main locations in the country, in Colombo, Kiribati, right? So people can go there and watch movies and entertain themselves, right? Some business organizations have created social media platforms like Facebook, right? Facebook, Instagram, to satisfy the need for entertainment. Understood? That's why I said business organizations will create wants to satisfy a particular need. Understood? Right. Next, we'll move on to the next point. Okay. Right. Right. A business organization. Don't give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Hold on. I think I missed a point. Hold on. All right. Okay. Right. So we'll move on to the next point, right? You can write the point. Businesses are dynamic in nature, right? Dynamic in nature, right? Dynamic in nature. That's the next point that you can write. Dynamic in nature, right? Right, right, right. What do you mean by businesses are dynamic in nature, right? As we discussed earlier, students, right? I told you the business environment is changing day by day, right? It could be the consumer preferences, it could be the technology, it could be the competition. So as a business organization, you are dealing with an environment which is continuously changing. So in that case, your business has to also have the guts to change. Your business should also change continuously. That's why it is been meant by dynamic in nature. Dynamic in simple terms, it's changing, right? Right, right. So that's what happened to Nokia. If I explained you earlier, right? The business environment for smartphone industry was changing continuously, right? But Nokia didn't want to change. They were continuously offering the same product as it is. But different competitors like Apple, Samsung, they came and they offered different types of options in their smartphones. But Nokia didn't change because they were the market leaders. They thought that, okay, customers will buy whatever we offer in a smartphone. But that era is gone now, because the business environment is changing, the customers who are in the business environment is changing, all the factors are changing. So when you're doing business, you got to be dynamic, you got to change accordingly. If the technology is changing, you got to adopt that new technology to your business, right? Right. If the consumer preferences are changing, you got to get an understanding what are the consumer expectations. Based on that, you have to change your product accordingly. Understood? That's why it says a business should be dynamic in nature. And also a business should be creative, right? A business must be creative, right? Right. What do you mean by a business must be creative, right? Nirmanashili when you're doing a business, right? Now, what I have seen is a lot of people are doing business, but they don't become successful. Why? Because they're not creative. What do? They just copy what their competitors are doing. And then you do the same thing like your competitor. So you're not creative, actually, you're copying. You're copying. When you're doing business, you got to be creative, students. You got to be creative. I now in here I can just explain you what you call uh, uh, things like the Uber app, how Uber app was created. Okay, right. So before the Uber app came into the world, right? Uh, uh, I mean, uh, I mean, if you wanted to find a taxi, right? If you wanted to find a taxi, right? On an urgent basis, you didn't have any option, right? Right? You didn't have any other option, right? Just like the same old technique of uh, booking a taxi prior in advance, like 2 3 weeks or few days ago, you book a taxi in advance, and the taxi comes and pick you off. But what Uber did was something creative, because people had the problem of getting a taxi on a real time basis, urgently. If I want to go now somewhere, I need to find a taxi. That was the problem uh, which was executed by Uber, right? Which was approached by Uber. So Uber created an app. Uber saw this problem and they were very creative and they created an app, right? Where people could find a taxi whenever they want based on their urgency and the need. Look how creative they was. They didn't copy the traditional cab service method. They did something different. So in that case, students, right, you got to be creative when you're doing business. Make sure that you don't copy what your competitors are doing. Right? Okay. Right. Right. Don't be bothered about what your competitors are doing. You always be creative and do whatever you have to do. Understood? Right. So that's another characteristic of a business, a very good business, right? Then we'll move on to the final characteristic of a business, right? The final characteristic of a business at the end of the day, right? Satisfaction of consumer needs and wants, right? Satisfaction of consumer needs and wants. Consumer needs and wants. Understood, right? So when you're doing a business, students, right, you got to understand what your consumers are requesting, right? Then you got to find a way to satisfy them. Can you remember last week we discussed about satisfaction, right? Consumers have an expected level of satisfaction from a product, right? Right. So if you don't offer a product beyond that expected level, then they are unsatisfied. If your consumers are unsatisfied, they won't come to you once again, right? They won't come to you once again. So in that case, you got to satisfy them where they have a expected level of satisfaction. You got to go beyond that and satisfy them. Then only they will come continuously and buy your product. Not only that, they will create a customer loyalty for them and they will refer your product to other customers as well. If you do that, if you satisfy your customers really well, you don't have to worry about spending millions of money for your marketing, right? You don't have to spend millions of money because your customers will do marketing for you. Understood? Right. Okay, fine. So students, those are the main characteristics of a business. So make sure that you read them once again. Just take 1 or 2 minutes, read them because it's very important, right? Very important. These have been tested in your examination over and over again. So read them, and after that, we'll move on to the main activities of a business. Go ahead. And if you all have any questions, kindly let me know. Right? If you all have any questions, kindly let me know. All right, students. Now we'll move on to the next part, right? Right now we discuss one of the most important parts of business, where the characteristics of business, right? Now we'll discuss what are the two main activities of a business, right? What are the main activities of a business, right? Okay. Right now, students, very specifically, if you look at a business organization, right, there are two main activities that they are actually trying to fulfill, right? Right. There are two main activities, right? Right. Two main activities, right? So, what are these two main activities of a business, right? You can write the first activity of a business. You all know that already. Fulfilling needs and wants, right? Fulfilling needs and wants. Needs and wants of who? Of customers. Of customers. Right? Fulfilling needs and wants of customers. Now, this, of course, you know very well because we have been harping on this all these days, right? Business organizations are there to understand the needs, and based on the needs, coming up with a particular option like a want to satisfy and keep them happy, right? Okay, right. So the second activity of a business is very important, right? The second main activity of a business that a business organization will be focusing is called adding value to resources. Ah, adding value to resources. Adding value to resources, right? So I would like to explain you a bit on this particular activity, adding value to resources, right? Okay, adding value to resources, right? Now, students, if you take a business organization, right? If you take a business organization, right? At the first point, they obtain raw material, right? They obtain raw material which is abundantly available in the natural environment. Okay, they obtain those things, right? Right, right. And then once those resources are obtained, right? Once those resources are obtained, as a business organization, in different steps, you will be adding value to these resources. You will be adding value to these resources, right? Okay. So let me take a small example and explain you how to add value to resources, or how value is added to resources, right? Let us go to our notepad, right? Okay, right. Adding value, right? Adding value to resources. Adding value to resources. Very important, right? Okay, I'll take a very classic example, right, where all of you all can understand. Let's take the tea processing industry in Sri Lanka. Let's take the tea processing industry in Sri Lanka. Tea processing. Tea processing, right? Because in Sri Lanka, we are known for tea. We are known for Ceylon tea in the world. So let's look at how this tea processing industry is adding value to the resources, right? Okay, right. So I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process of adding value to these resources. Then you all can have a very good understanding, right? Okay. Now, right now, if you take the first step, right? Right. First step, what happens is, right now, this tea, right? These tea leaves are grown in tea estates, na? Right? Have you seen tea estates? Right? Have you seen tea estates? When you go to Hatton, no, when you go to Nuerelia, right? You might have seen a lot of tea estates where it's filled with lots of tea leaves, right? Okay, so that is actually the natural resource that we have, right? Right. We grow tea, right, in the up country, and even in the what do you call south part of the country also we grow tea. But this is actually where we plant the tea leaves, right? Tea leaves are planted, right? Tea leaves planted in where? In tea estates, right? In tea estates. Tea estates, right? How many of you all have been to a tea estate? How many of you all have been to a tea estate? Any show of hands? Right? Right. I've been to a couple of tea estates, right? Yeah, there you go, right? So our online students have got, right? Okay, a few physical students, they have also been to tea estates, right? Okay, it's a different feeling, no? You get to see what do you call these tea leaves are being planted, right? What do you call over hectares of lands, and you get a instant relaxation when you see this full of green, right? Right, and in the same size also, right? Okay, right. So that's the natural resource that we have. The tea leaves are being planted in tea estates, right? Now, still we have not, right now, still we have not made tea out of these tea leaves. Can we just plug these tea leaves and just put into hot water, and can we just convert them into tea? No, right? Right. The next step is, right, the second step is actually what? You got to you got to hand pick these leaves very carefully. Hand picking, right? Hand picking, right? We can call it as harvesting as well, right? Right. Right. තේතලු නෙලනවා කියලා කියන්නේ නේ, right? Those lovely ladies, right? Mostly ladies actually what do you call hand picking these tea leaves, right? Right. Right. So they have a small bucket which is been tied up. So they pick the leaves and then they put it to the bucket. So it's called hand picking the tea leaves, right? So the second step is you hand pick the leaves, right? Still, it's not over. Once the tea leaves are hand picked, right? And now I'm talking about the process, how value is added, right? Right. In each of these process, I mean, in each of the steps of this process. Once the tea leaves are hand picked, then they have been brought into a factory. For what? For processing, right? In a factory, you process them, right? Right. Factory processing. Factory processing. Right. So in the factory, you will have different types of machines, right? You will have different types of machines, right? So in the factory, right, you what do you call you spread these tea leaves which has been plucked, right? You spread it on a a flat surface. You dry them, right? Then you ferment them, right? All those things are done, and then at the end of the day, these tea leaves which you plucked are converted into tea powder in your processing facility, right? Right? Tea powder. Now you have tea powder. And now you have tea powder. Tea powder, right? Look how we added value from this level to this level, right? Right? Because at this level, as consumers, we cannot consume. Right? We cannot use just tea leaves and put it to hot water and just drink as tea. No, it doesn't taste good, and I don't think. I mean, it won't work. So you got to convert these tea leaves into nice and nice little soft powder, which is your tea powder, where you get the aroma, right? When you smell it, right? Isn't it right? I like the aroma of tea when it is in the powder format, right? When you open up your lid, the what do you call the tea jar, you get to feel that aroma, right? So a lot of foreigners also, they do love that aroma. That's why we are very popular, right? Okay, right. So still the process is not over. Now in the factory, we have processed tea powder from our tea leaves, right? And after that, what do we need to do? We need to add further value. What do? We need to package it properly, students. We need to package it properly, right? Packaging, right? Packaging, very important. Packaging, right? Right. We have different types of tea powders, no? Lipton tea, Mlesna tea, Delma tea, which is the world famous what you call tea brand from Sri Lanka. So you have to package it with a brand. You have to make the package in a very attractive way. Then only people will buy. Then only people from other countries will buy. They know the tea from the brand. So you have to do a nice packaging for this, right? Right? A nice packaging for this, right? Once packaging is done, students, then you have to do what? Still the process is not over, right? Now you have to do distribution and marketing. Now you have to do distribution and marketing. Distribution and then marketing, right? 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 Once the tea powder is being packaged, you cannot keep the packages inside your factory. No point. You got to send it to the market. You got to send it to books, boutiques, supermarkets, to other countries. You have to find a plan to distribute them. Then at the end of the day, what happens? Right? So in here we are focusing on marketing part as well, right? So you see a lot of advertisements on television, no? Right? Lipton tea, whatever the tea, right? You see a lot of advertisements that is also being handled in marketing because there are a lot of competitors for tea, right? So you got to take your brand. If it is Watervalley, you got to take Watervalley to the minds of the people that this is the best tea in the world, right? In the country. Then only people will buy, right? So you got to face competition with proper marketing. And then at the end of the day, you consume, right? You consume what? A nice cup of tea, right? You consume a nice cup of tea, right? You consume a nice cup of tea, right? Right? A nice hot cup of tea, right? This is the steam. Nice hot cup of tea with a piece of cake at the end of the day, right? Okay, right? So now can you see, students, the process that is being followed in converting our raw material or natural resource of tea leaves into tea powder, and it is being distributed to the consumers, right? Look how the most important part is, look how in this process how value is being added and generated. If tea was there in its original format of leaves, we will not be able to have a nice cup of tea. It's in the natural format. But at each stage, in hand picking, we handpick the most because we cannot use all the types of tea leaves, no. අපි යන තේ දල්ල කඩනවා කියලා කියන්නේ, right? Okay, so you got to hand pick that most lucrative tea leaf, right? You add value there, and then that is being processed in a factory with machines. That tea leaves are being nicely dried up and converted to tea powder, right? right in here, you will add flavors to tea, right? Have you seen you have raspberry tea, you have green tea, Moroccan tea, no? Right Orange flavored tea, right? So in here you're adding some more value to the traditional tea, Rather than just selling the novelty, you add value to it by adding flavors. Once more value is added. Then at the packaging stage, you add a nice package where when the customer sees it, they will get attracted to that package. Not only us, if it goes to the international market, those foreigners should also get attracted. You prepare a nice packaging, right? Right. No point of just sending the powder in a small packet. No point. You got to be attractive, and then you do the distribution and marketing. That is also very important. You do all these things, and if you don't transport it properly, right? Right. If you are delivering the products in Sri Lanka, then you got to have a distribution facility, right? Warehouses, lorries, containers, and if you are dealing with international markets, you got to send them through ships, through air freight, whatever. You got to have a plan for distribution, and then one day you will be able to have a nice cup of tea, a fragrant, aromatic cup of Ceylon tea with a beautiful piece of cake. You can enjoy that if this process has been done and if value has been added in this process. Understood? Right? So that's why, students, adding value to resources is very important activity of a business organization. Understood? Right? Right? So when the value is added at each of these processes, what happens to the price of the product also? It will also increase. When the value is added, the price should also go up. Understood? Understood? Right. Okay, fine. So I hope you all understood the whole concept, right? So make sure that you draw this process of how to add value in the tree processing industry, right? Did you all understand the concept, students? Did you all understand the concepts? Yes, very important. Yes. All right, good, good, good. Right, okay, fine. So students, another thing I just want to mention, right? In this process, we use a lot of resources, right? We use a lot of resources. Like what? We use human skills to pick the right leaf, right? To pick the right leaves, we need human skills. Labor, right? What else we need? Technology for the factory, right? Right, right. So likewise, capital, right? Right, investment. So you need different types of what do you call resources, right? You need different types of resources, different types of skills, right, to convert your natural resources into the final product that will satisfy human needs and wants, right? So when you have a cup of coffee, sorry, when you have a cup of tea, right, you will be what? At the end of the day, you will be satisfied. You will be satisfied with a big smile. Understood? Right. There you go. Those are the two main activities of a business organization, right? Adding value to resources and then satisfying needs and wants of human beings, right? Understood? All right, students, I will give you small time. Kindly draw this in your notebook, right? And if you all have any questions, kindly just let me know.